Dr. Mark Jangizi here with your science moment. The left is always trying to implement their ingenious authoritarian schemes to save the world. I mean, the right has its own problems, but I'm just going to talk about the left today. Now, the left usually, when they're doing this, has some pushback, some degree of pushback. But in March of 2020, the authoritarian left suddenly and unexpectedly got a huge majority of the world demanding that the state enact civil liberties violating measures like in China to save us from COVID. Here was the left's moment to display how their experts can enact wise policies, making a better world. For cost-benefit analyses, they didn't even pretend to do them. Proportion. They astronomically exaggerated the risks from COVID and failed to recognize the 4 orders of magnitude range of risks from young to old, healthy to many comorbidities. Lockdowns. They implemented lockdowns worldwide in spite of their being recommended against in 2019, which had little or no effect on transmission and massive harms on mortality and economies. Consensus. Their decisions were primarily based on copycatting other countries, not on independent judgment. CYA. Their actions were driven in large part by being seen to be doing something. Civil liberties. Nowhere in their considerations were civil liberties at all. Fauci even said, "I don't view this as a civil liberties thing." Masks. They quickly transitioned from masks obviously don't work to masks totally work and everyone must wear one within 2 months. They don't work and have myriads of harms. Shutdowns. Hundreds of thousands of businesses went out of business forever, along with the jobs of millions of people. Economy. The economy is still reeling, and yet anyone with any common sense would realize you can't freeze an economy. Stampede. Anyone claiming to lead must, most of all, understand the behavior of large crowds and be able to recognize the signs of moral panic, mass hysteria, mob-like behavior, and so on. The signs were everywhere at the start, but our expert leaders saw none of it. They were within the madness. Vaccines. They pushed for prejudice and hatred of the unvaccinated, who lost their jobs, were banished from public spaces, prevented from travel, and in some cases, denied medical care. Free speech. They justified to themselves that their ingenious scheme was so good that it was righteous and good to order social media companies to silence critical voices, which social media companies then did. We carry on this fight against the COVID tyrannical policies not just because we must teach the evil that occurred. We carry on this fight because the entire COVID debacle is a case study in the ability for centralized left-leaning governments to instantiate their ingenious schemes to save us. They had an unfettered opportunity. They failed on policy. None even narrowly worked. All had massive harms. Civil liberties were shredded. Bodily autonomy, freedom of movement, freedom of association, freedom of dress, freedom of speech, informed consent, sacrificed for their righteous and ingenious schemes. The COVID debacle must be understood to be the empirical and ethical debacle it was. The COVID debacle must be used for generations as the evidence to shut down the attempts by our righteous betters to control us for their notion of the good. And that was your science moment.